It is the paramount duty of the state to make ample provision for the education of all children residing within its borders, without distinction or preference on account of race, color, caste, or sex. This is Article 9, Section 1 of the Washington State Constitution. In 2007, two families, Venema and McCleary, filed a suit against the state of Washington, alleging that the state was not meeting its constitutional obligation to amply fund education. They were supported by Network for Excellence in Washington Schools and various other public school districts. The goal was simple. Washington State needed to live up to their promise. Easier said than done. McCleary v. the State of Washington is a contemporary landmark case in education funding that has implications for decades to come.
In 2007, McCleary v. State was filed with the King County Superior Court. By 2010, the King County Superior Court acknowledged that Washington State was out of compliance with Article 9 of the Washington State Constitution. Article 9 asserts that the state amply funds schools without discrimination and with school funding uniformity. In February 2011, oral arguments were heard in Washington State Supreme Court. The decision regarding this case came in 2012 when the Washington State Supreme Court ruled in favor of the plaintiffs. In 2014, the Washington State Supreme Court was unhappy with legislative actions and found Washington State in contempt of court. They began to fine legislator $100,000 every day the problem persisted. They gave a deadline of 2018 for the state to reach compliance. What follows is the decision process of legislation and their attempt to reach compliance.
On January 11, 2007, the McClearys, Venemus, and News, which stands for Network for Excellence in Washington Schools, a statewide partnership of community groups, school districts, and education organizations, filed the petition. 2 years later, King County Superior Court acknowledged that the state was in fact not upholding Article 9, Section 1 of the Washington State Constitution. During trial, the evidence emphasized three main areas of underfunding. These were basic operational costs, student transportation, and staff salaries and benefits. The state's reliance on levy funding and local dollars to fund the basic education program also failed to provide sufficient funding required by Article 9, Section 1. The other side of the case was the Washington Supreme Court. In 2012, they issued an order holding the state in contempt for failing to make real and measurable progress toward meeting the court's instructions to fully fund the state's basic education program by 2018. In 2014, the Supreme Court issued its response. The Washington State Supreme Court decided to put pressure on legislatures to provide local school districts the billions of dollars of additional K-12 funding. As confirmed by the state, this funding is needed to cure decades of unconstitutional underfunding. This included funding for salary increases, materials and operations, transportation, along with both the staffing and construction costs for full-day kindergarten and K-3 class size reductions.
In 2015, the state passed a budget with significant increase to school funding. However, the Supreme Court felt it was proportionally too low of an increase and continued to fine the state $100,000 a day. In 2016, the state asked the court to remove the sanctions, but the court denied their request and continued fining the state. In 2017, the state tackled funding issues by increasing the statewide income tax. This was not enough to push Washington State into compliance. As the 2018 deadline was quickly approaching, state taxes increased once again by over $800 million, pushing Washington State into compliance with court orders. On June 7, 2018, the Washington State Supreme Court found Washington State in compliance and stopped the daily fining.
The McCleary decision mandated the funding of basic education for Washington schools, but this was only the bare minimum of what schools need. Superintendent of Education Chris Reichdahl believes that the decision in this long struggle is not the final destination, but the beginning of a multi-phase redesign of Washington's K-12 education system. This redesign is estimated at an additional $4 billion per year, but focuses on the education system that we need instead of settling for what is tolerated politically in the short term. McCleary has given us a chance to take a deep look at how we educate our children so they are successful in their lives and are active contributors to society. Phase 1 had a focus on defining basic education and the state's responsibility for teacher salaries. It also added targeted support for schools with large gaps between student demographics in the district. Phase 2 will provide changes and alternatives for pathways to graduation. It also plans for greater opportunities for families to be involved in their child's education and key investments in technology across the state. Phase 3 is the comprehensive redesign phase. It touts dual language starting in kindergarten, universal early learning access, and changes to schedules such as longer days for kindergarten through 8th grade and an extended school day for all that includes longer lunches and adequate breaks for students.